Hey everybody, welcome to episode 80 of Tuesdays with Perry. It is Tuesday. Today we're going to be talking about, we're going to go back a little bit, about a week, and talk about Chuck Schumer's non-kosher barbecue. We're also going to talk about, recently, the anti-Israel mob that attacked, or actually rioted outside an LA synagogue. And then we're going to talk about the ramp up to the presidential debate, how the mainstream media is flooding the airwaves with anti-Trump smears, undermining any Trump argument that he might put forth, including possibly pardoning or freeing Julian Assange, which Julian Assange is free during his plea bargain, or part of his plea bargain with the United States government. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about CNN anchor, CNN anchor Casey Hunt cutting off Caroline Leavitt, Trump spokesperson, as she appeared on the program. Of course, they're doing everything to undermine Trump before the debate. And Alex Jones of InfoWars fame will probably be shut down before the debate as well. So they're going to cut off all avenues for a conservative argument, to say the least. So let's get Perry on the line.
Hello? Hello?
Is that you, Perry?
I am here.
Too funny. Thanks for joining us tonight, Perry. It is Tuesdays with Perry, episode 80. Welcome to the program, my friend. Let's start off with Chucky Schumer, shall we? Last week, or it might have even been 2 weeks ago, he put together a barbecue that wasn't quite kosher, and I know you have a few words to give us words of wisdom regarding Chuck Schumer. So why don't you give us your take on that raw? Give us your raw take on that barbecue.
Well, I don't know what is more hilarious. The fact that he was trying to portray himself as a real big daddy of the grill, or the fact that his staffers that tried to stage the burger patties wasn't smart enough to realize you don't put cheese, even if you're not kosher. Forget people who are kosher, because if you're kosher, I happen to not be kosher. I call myself kosher light. Yeah. I don't mix any dairy with any meat.
Right. And
we can get into that later, but
you do eat what? You do eat shellfish?
I do not eat shellfish. I do not eat pork. But that's kosher light. If you are truly kosher, Rudy, you have to have 2 separate refrigerators, 2 separate ovens. You have to have not 2, but 3 sets of flatware and chinaware, because for Passover, you have a separate silverware set and china set that you use only for those 8 days of the year. So you have to have 3 sets of china and flatware. Oh. And never do your cooking utensils for meat ever get shared with anything that is dairy,
regardless of how they're washed or whatever, right?
Correct. Right. I mean, there is a way that the term the rabbis use is koshering. There is a way to properly kosher, let's say, a soup ladle that came in contact with a meat product. But I don't want to digress into that, because I don't want to bore your listeners to death. Right. The point being is, that's a far cry from what Schmucky Chucky was trying to portray at the grill.
Right.
He doesn't even know what side of a spatula to use, let alone the fact that one of his staffers, as they prepared the grill to be photographed with him in the shot,
right,
threw what was probably either a frozen or near still frozen hamburger patty, covered that patty with cheese. And so, first of all, if he were a truly practicing Jew, he would never do that. He certainly doesn't want the Jewish community of greater New York to see that. But what really outraged me above and beyond that is, and I read the whole article in the Post, and in that article, he's portraying himself as a humble civil servant of the masses. And he went on to say to the reporter how his daughter and her wife
right,
had bought the first home in their family, meaning Schmucky is trying to say, oh yeah, I've paid rent my entire life. I don't own a house. I don't own a condo. I don't own a co-op in Manhattan or Brooklyn. I live in this little 2-bedroom apartment where the radiator clinks and clangs all night long in the wintertime, and I have to have a window air unit in order to stay cool in my bedroom at night. Yeah, he's portraying himself as that. And what really annoyed the piss out of me is this mofo not only has never held a job outside of government, he came out of law school, and the first thing he did was run for city council. And after getting a city rep job, he then ran for state rep. And then after state rep, he became a U.S. rep. And I remember him as he was running for U.S. rep. I was still a teenager. And I think Schmucky is in his either early 70s or mid 70s now. And then after that, I think when, if I'm not mistaken, no, Jacobs lost in his primary to Alphonse D'Amato. But he ran for the open senatorial seat. I think when Moynihan died, he ran for Moynihan's seat, and he easily won that seat.
right.
And so here he is. He's a multimillionaire, but he tries to portray himself as this humble servant of the people who's had nothing. He's never even had a patio to put a little Traeger or Weber grill on. This is the first chance he's ever had, and it's all because of how successful his homosexual daughter and her wife have been.
Right.
And so they're having and he's celebrating Father's Day at their place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, please stick a sock in it. I am so sick of looking at your sad puss. He reminds me of this villainous teenage. I'm trying to remember the name of the cartoon. This villainous teenage ne'er-do-well who always went around going and always going after the proletariat of the cartoon.
Yeah.
And that's who Schmucky Chucky is.
Yeah, you remember when he and Nancy Pelosi appeared together in some sort of Trump rebuttal, I believe, and they just looked like the most villainous pair you could ever see, one from the Senate and one from the House. Yeah, right, exactly. And there were many memes going around depicting American Gothic with them in their place. They were like, the two of them are really quite villainous, to say the least. But I just thought it was funny that the fact is that was a terrible and they deleted the picture from the X account. And not only was it bad barbecuing, what is happening? I am down for the count here. Oh, I am having some technical difficulties here. But yeah, that was just very, very strange. Just hold on one second, Perry. I gotta see if I gotta fix something here. So just hold on one second.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Perry. I swear to God, you're talking about Chucky Schumer. It seems like every time I talk about Chucky Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, that I start having technical difficulties. Technical difficulties. You know, he did say, you know, if you piss off the intelligence agencies, they have 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you. I think it doesn't even have to be the intelligence agencies. I think it just has to be Chuck Schumer, who I don't know. Is he on the? He's not on the Senate Intelligence Committee, is he?
You know, I get the feeling he is, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just the way he tried to give Trump advice, and I'm using that in air quotes.
yeah.
Don't piss off the intelligence gathering network, because and that is an accurate quote. You just quoted him accurately.
Yeah.
They got 6 ways to Sunday to string your ass up.
Before we get on to the other news, I do want to get into one quick headline. I'm going to cover it tomorrow. Apparently, the CIA has come forth with a statement saying that the former intelligence people that put out the letter supposedly debunking or allegedly debunking the Hunter Biden laptop, the CIA has come out with a letter or a memo saying that all those people that were supposedly former intelligence officials were actually active contractors for the agency when they signed on to that letter, more than likely for the agency. That's reported in the New York Post today. So,
and they still have their intelligence clearances.
Oh, absolutely. Nice. They do for life. The other question is, how does Anthony Fauci still have Secret Service protection? Government protection.
But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doesn't.
Right, exactly. But because he's no longer a government official. So, all right, let's dig into the news. First up, I got to go to this National Review story. Anti-Israel mob beats Jewish woman. This is from one day ago. In riot outside a Los Angeles synagogue. And it was at the Adas Torah Synagogue in Los Angeles Sunday, in a display that turned violent as keffiyeh-clad activists attacked a Jewish woman on the street, and there was more mayhem. The police were called in and so forth and so on. But this is the first anti- or pro-Palestinian demonstration outside of a synagogue. Why they picked this synagogue. But since we're on the Jewish bend here, I'd just like a quick comment from you on this.
Well, months ago, we had a very similar conversation, and I told you it was going to get worse. This is another sign. One of the reasons why I said it was going to get worse is because when they had a chance, and I don't mean just the universities, I'm talking about the federal government. When they had an opportunity back at the beginning of the year to put a stop to the violent rhetoric, you know, I'm almost as big a supporter of the First Amendment as you are. And I say almost because I didn't earn my living. I've never earned my living as a journalist. You have. And that puts you ahead of me when it comes to protecting the First Amendment. But having said that, I am the biggest supporter of the First Amendment you're going to find among most civilian Joe Schmoes and Joe Schmuckatellis. And I am deadly opposed to the argument being made by the anti-Jewish crowd. And let's face it, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about pro-Palestine. When somebody chants in a Jewish person's face, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they are saying, we want you dead. We don't want there to be an Israel. We want the whole enchilada. And when they say that, and they say that with such severity, that it's to send an emotional as well as physical message to you that if I had the power, I would kill you right now.
Yeah.
That's not free speech. Okay? That's not even hate speech. That is violence. And that is exactly what started happening at the beginning of the year. And when the administrators of Columbia and Harvard, to a much lesser extent, Yale, and Princeton, and 2 or 3 other campuses, I think Penn, when they looked the other way because they argued, well, this is free speech. These are the same people who said I'm talking about students, who protested in favor of the argument of sparing life in the abortion issue. They didn't have the right to do that on campus. And so when this took place 5 and 6 months ago, I told your audience it was going to get worse. And Sunday is a precursor to what's coming. That is not a one-off. And I'll tell you why it's not a one-off. It is because very little was done to them. You know, all these protesters that blocked the interstate in, was it Seattle a couple of months ago? There were a couple of people who died because not only were they not able to get to an airport, there were ambulances that were blocked. And I think it was San Francisco now. The DA for that city it was just announced last week. It was one of the reasons why I was sorry that you and I didn't have our Tuesdays with Perry episode. I wanted to bring that up last week, so I guess I'm bringing it up now. She just dismissed all the charges against all except a handful of these protesters.
Right.
Same thing in New York City.
Yep.
Alvin Bragg dismissed all the charges against all those violent protesters who took over buildings and smashed glass and did all of this destruction, okay? And simply said, no, we're going to dismiss these cases. So you want to know why cops are giving up? That's why they're giving up. Yeah. And this sent the message to these so-called protesters. These are fucking terrorists.
Yeah.
Because that was the whole purpose, was to terrorize this woman.
Yeah.
And they succeeded. Yeah. Physically harmed this woman. And very little is being done about it. There will be, I'm sure there'll be trespassing charges and simple assault, but that's a misdemeanor. That's not a felony. And then, so what message is that being sent to others who are now organizing and getting ready to carry this out somewhere else? Yeah. And let's not forget about all the terrorists that are running around, and I mean real terrorists from third world nations that are now running around across the entire fruited plain of the United States, waiting for their marching orders to carry out some kind of terrorism, whatever that might be. Yeah. Okay? That's what's coming.
Yeah, at the very least, it's providing cover for actual Iranian, Hezbollah, et cetera, terrorists that will carry out even more heinous attacks under the cover of keffiyeh wearing college students or what have you. So because right. it blurs the lines, and then we're really going to have a problem, because then you're going to have instances where DAs release people for violent behavior, really hate behavior, and I hate using that word because Me too. Hate speech and hate just in general. The left uses it as a cudgel for any criticism whatsoever. But these types of acts and these types of free passes given to people that are violent just opens the door for maybe lone wolves, but also other actors, sleeper cells, et cetera, that could be activated. All right, before we run out of time, I want to quickly go through the precursor for the debate, which is the mainstream media leading up to and trying to really defang any argument or defense Donald Trump may have. So first, CNN reports special counsel defends investigators handling of Mar-a-Lago documents, even though we know that through the Presidential Records Act, Trump had the right to retain documents, and we know that he stored them correctly and was even admonished, and then he did the fixes that were requested of him. They weren't haphazardly left. They were locked in a room, and when the FBI took them over, they spread them out on the floor to give the indication that that's how Trump had them, and then put cover sheets that didn't actually ever exist. And Market Watch is reporting that Trump beats Biden for the King of Debt title, even though they add in the debt for tax breaks that were given by Trump, which isn't really adding to the debt because it's not part of spending. You don't spend on tax breaks. They're not sending out checks. You just take in less revenue, but you don't really take in less revenue. You actually bring in more revenue when you cut people's taxes, but that's not part of spending. And of course, they do fuzzy math with the COVID stimulus. Supposedly, Trump, Biden didn't have a $4 trillion COVID bill. I don't know how they do this fuzzy math at Market Watch. And then back to CNN. Justice Sotomayor references Dobbs and says that actually doesn't necessarily agree, but actually quotes the fact that the majority said abortion rights do not undermine in any way other entrenched rights, such as contraception and marriage, that the left continually says, oh, you take away abortion and the next thing is contraception and gay marriage, and nobody is even leading to that. And the coup de grace here is, even though Trump did not signal he was going to pardon Assange, Julian Assange has been freed as part of a plea deal that doesn't absolve him, and as I said today, actually makes him a target, so don't expect him to survive for very long. I predict a heart attack in the coming weeks. He is going to be he's going to go back. They insisted he goes back to Australia, and many many pundits on the right said he should have been allowed to go to Russia. At least he would be safe there from the Western intelligence agencies, but he's going back to one of the Club of Bern members, which is like part of the Five Eyes of intelligence agencies, going to Australia, which he's not very well liked by the government there, although he's well liked by the populace. So I don't predict a good ending for him, but he is free, which in itself is important. And of course, many people have saw CNN anchor Cassie Hunt cut off Carolyn Levitt, the spokesperson for the Trump campaign, because they said she made disparaging comments, even though the only thing she said is over the past 8 years, the moderators, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, were biased in the coverage of Trump, which they were. And they said you could Google it. And Hunt said that was an attack on her colleague. So why don't we start there? And also, I want to briefly hit, if we have time, Alex Jones will probably be shut down before the debate because he's promising to do a live coverage of the debate. I don't think he'll be able to do that. I think he'll be shut down before. But why don't we start with CNN and all their, that's three things they're doing to throwing out there as far as news is concerned, trying to undermine Trump's arguments and his defense on abortion, and obviously about the moderators, and of course, the Mar-a-Lago document case. So take it away on any one of those CNN points, Perry.
All right, well, let's start with the pseudo-journalist who, when they were confronted with a guest who did not toe their line, immediately just simply pulled the plug. Yeah. This is a tactic they've gone to since the Trump years began because they have no way to combat it. Yeah. So when it was being pointed out to them, and look, unless you suffer from TDS and and or you have no idea who Dana Bash and Jake Tapper are, okay, you know what was being stated is accurate. You can simply go back over the last 8 years, 9 years if you want to include 2015 when he came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower. You can start right there with how the coverage of his candidacy, of the coverage of his campaign as nominee, when you look at the coverage of his every single presidential press conference, how each one of those were conducted by the press, including Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, not them exclusively, including them, but specifically to the point being made during this show on Communist News Network. Okay, if I'm lying, show me anything that they spoke of with regard to President Trump where they put him in anything but a negative light. You can't do it because they were given marching orders by the head of CNN at the time, Zucker. And Zucker's modus operandi was anything we talk about regarding this man is going to be negative. Negative, negative, negative. And so they were good soldiers. They carried it out. It's not a lie. It's fact. And everybody in America knows it's fact. So I'm not surprised by it. And this is good because this furthers the argument that Trump's handlers have already made to him. Not that he needed to have this shown to him. He knows what he's walking into. He's walking into a buzzsaw, but he's the one that's going to break the saw.
Break the blade,
on Thursday night. He's going to turn it all around. And look, he doesn't have to win. He just has to prove he has the temperament and he has the correct argument when it comes to answering questions. Yeah. That's all he has to do. Uncle Joe, after the first 20 minutes, the amphetamines are going to wear off and he's going to start talking about corn puff again.
corn puff.
I call him corn puff.
Well, hey, and we have history on our side. Remember the CNN town hall that they gave Trump in 2020?
Right.
Or was it? I think it was since then, where they had their new anchor there stand up with him there and try to fact check him on the fly there. He tore her up, and that didn't work well for them. Also, they've been airing, including on Sean Hannity and many other programs, when Jake Tapper had Steve Miller on the program, and as soon as Steve Miller started to put up a dissenting opinion in the fight, Jake Tapper just shut him down, and went to the next story. So we know what the history is there.
Right.
And we talked about this briefly off air, that they're going to give Trump very little time. They're going to interrupt him many times, and they're going to give Joe Biden the floor, particularly early on when the Adderall is still working, that he can speak cogently on subjects, especially when he's not being interrupted. And so what is your take necessarily on some of the other things? I know you're not a Alex Jones watcher, but if you weren't paying attention to the news, the person overseeing his bankruptcy there and his trustee for the parents of Sandy Hook is trying to shut down, because he was supposed to stay open so the proceeds could go to the family. But now, as they said during his trial, they're looking to shut him down. Before we comment a little bit on the debt figures from Market Watch, you have any comments about Alex Jones being shut down?
Well, they better be really careful about what they do right now to Alex Jones, because I promise you, Alex Jones is going to be the real life incarnation of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan said, The moment you strike me down, I will be stronger. And it's going to happen because right now, Alex Jones is his own man. His company, which operates InfoWars, that's Alex Jones. They're taking that away from him through bankruptcy, which, by the way, for the life of me, and this is another reason why I say we have a corrupt judicial system. For the life of me, even if you could see somehow that he should be held liable, which neither you or I think he should be, held liable for the so-called pain and suffering of these families at Sandy Hook, how do you come up with a number of $1.5 billion? How is that even possible? Where does that come from? And the fact that it could not be overturned through the appeals process, that's a perfect example of how corrupt our government has become. Just the judicial system alone, that's just one example. Okay, so you've taken his own personal megaphone with the initials AJ on it away from him. Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Someone, whether it's Tucker Carlson or Fox News, it won't be Fox News, or America One, somebody
Elon
is going
Musk,
to grab him and give him another megaphone. And I'm telling you, his voice will be magnified by that action.
Yeah, I think so.
It's coming.
Yeah,
so
like Tucker, yeah.
Exactly. Tucker is a perfect example. He has no constraints on him whatsoever. I mean, he's always argued that Rupert Murdoch never put constraints on him. But to a certain extent, they obviously had a policy, don't go there.
Well, there was a constraint in taking him off the air. It's a constraint.
Well, no. I mean, before that happened, the whole reason why they took him off the air is because they realized, unlike Hannity, they couldn't control him.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why, and I've said this to your audience at the time. Tucker was fired by Fox. I lost all remaining respect I had for Sean Hannity when he just sat there and said nothing.
Right.
No, he didn't. The night that Tucker was fired, and keep in mind, Sean's show in those days came on immediately after. The whole reason why Sean still had a fucking audience
was because of Tucker. Yeah.
And to not even acknowledge the fact that his lead-in was no longer going to be on. He didn't have to take Tucker's side.
Yeah.
All he had to say is, it's unfortunate. I wish it didn't happen. And I wish my friend well.
Yeah.
He couldn't even utter those words.
Well, they wouldn't let him, yeah. And the thing...
Well, my point is, what are they going to do? Fire him?
Yeah.
Are they going to fire Sean Hannity for acknowledging Tucker? And if they did, well, you still got your radio show, Sean. Yeah. You're worth tens of millions of dollars. It's not like you need the fucking money. So when that happened, that's it. I mean, I was already tired because, Sean Hannity is just the same old rah, rah, rah every freaking night. Yeah. I get tired of him telling me what I already know about Uncle Joe. Move on.
Right, and that Sean trains MMA and that he eats paleo and all this other shit. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. We'll see what happens with Alex Jones. And the funny thing is, if you look at Alex Jones's cases, they very well mimic the civil case against Donald Trump with Gene Carroll, because it was the same thing. He was ordered to pay the judgment, and usually the judgment is pending appeal. So Jones and Trump are both pending. They both have pending appeals, but they're ordered to pay restitution regardless. And the New York Post article ends by saying, Alex Jones said now that he believes the shooting at Sandy Hook happened, but free speech rights allowed him to say it didn't. So that's the point, is he's allowed to talk about things. You don't have to like what he said, but as you said in the beginning, how does that get people awarded $1.5 billion when somebody says something on a radio show that didn't really affect them, but they said it did?
And that's something that has to be said over and over and over again, Rudy, because if they will do this to people they don't like, they'll do it to anybody.
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose of the First Amendment. And it's no different than the Second Amendment. And you and I have had conversations, and I know we don't have time for this tonight, so I'll make it very brief. The Second Amendment clearly says that the government can't put any restrictions on your right to own and bear arms. But what have they done over the last 100 years since certainly the Wilson administration?
Yeah.
They've done exactly the opposite. They tell you how many rounds you can keep in a clip. They tell you what caliber of weapon you're allowed to own. You can't own a fully automatic machine gun without a Class 3 license.
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. If it's a right, why do I need a license?
Yeah.
You know, driving isn't a right. It's a privilege. That's the reason why you have to prove you are competent behind the wheel of a motor vehicle before you are assigned a motor vehicle license to drive.
Yeah.
I don't need a license to bear and own arms, but yet the federal government and state governments tell me I do.
Yeah.
And if I don't like it, go pound sand. So there's been this encroachment on our individual rights and freedoms for 100 years. And the more powerful the federal government, the centralized government gets, which is exactly the opposite of what our founding fathers wanted to give us and did give us, the more powerful that centralized government gets, the weaker the individual becomes.
And it's not
and
just...
that's exactly what they're doing right now to Alex Jones, and they've already done to Donald Trump. And that's why I've said, E. Jean Carroll can laugh herself silly all she wants. She will never see one fucking dime because it will go through the appeals process.
Yeah, well,
here's the problem.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. If they will do this to Trump, they will do it to anyone. And you and I, God forbid, all it takes is some little twitch like E. Jean Carroll to find a girlfriend. And I'm talking about any E.G. Jean Carroll. They don't like what you say. And they find out where you live and where you broadcast from. And they find out what Starbucks you hang out at. And then all of a sudden, something occurs in a parking lot. You're trying to get away from her, but she's all over you. And then she claims you tried to rape her. And her girlfriend says, yeah, I saw it all.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're brought up on rape charges. Now you have to prove a negative. And if they'll do it to Trump, if they'll do it, and the whole point is, in Trump's trial, he wasn't allowed to bring any witnesses.
Yep.
He wasn't allowed to bring any experts. It was his word against hers and the word of her girlfriend, who claims she received one phone call from E. Jean Carroll that Donald Trump raped her. And like Trump said, rape her when I'm married to what I'm married to? What are you smoking in that pipe?
Yeah, unlikely.
And right, unlikely. But yet look where he's at.
Yeah.
Look, but he has the money to defend himself. You and I don't have $500,000 to find a top-notch criminal attorney who will start working the case for us for a $50,000 retainer.
Yeah.
And even if we did, what's left of our little nest egg after we've proven our innocence?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay? The same thing with Alex Jones. He didn't do anything wrong. Even if his opinion is wrong, it's an opinion.
Yeah.
And when opinion makers aren't allowed to speak their mind, you no longer have a free society.
Yeah. Well, that's the electorate is seeing all that. And that's the reason that the corporate global oligarchy is attacking America, because it's attacking individual freedom, because they can't have that globally while they're putting in their technological authoritarianism. All right, we got 5 minutes. I need your comments on the debate. We have Market Watch putting out that Trump is the king of debt, not Biden. And CNN saying the special counsel says the investigators at Mar-a-Lago documents were right to do what they did. But what I really want from you, you can comment on those or not, but what I really want from you is what are we going to expect from the debate? In 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes. Here's the thing. The whole purpose of this debate is to make Uncle Joe look as close to lucid as they can. That's what this is all about. All he has to do is show up and not fall asleep on camera, and he wins. Okay? That's what this is all about. They don't have to make Trump look bad. They just have to make Uncle Joe look like he's ready to take on another 4 years at his beachside home in Delaware. Okay? That's all this is. Yes, they will go after Trump, and they will do it in the way we've already talked about, which is to make him look incompetent, to make him look, because I go through this all the time whenever I'm trying to find myself some amusement, and I go on to X, and I'm dealing with these morons like Brooklyn Dad and some of these other miscreants of society who claim to be Democrats, and they do the same thing those in the media do. Oh, Trump, I can't stomach the idea of another 4 years. He almost ruined this country. And I'll say, okay, so $1.88 per gallon gasoline until now, the lowest unemployment rate in American history. And oh, by the way, the job participation index put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics had Trump at 78% job participation, meaning anyone between the ages of 18 and 65 that could hold a job were in full-time employment, and now it's below 70%, and that's the only way you can get to 3.4 unemployment right now, which is, by the way, starting to tick up. Okay, that's number one. I think it was 1.6 inflation, 1.8 inflation versus, which is a lie right now, but the media is trying to say that we're only at 3% right now, or 3+% inflation right now. Yet at the same time, our GDP was rising at twice the rate of inflation under Trump, but now under Biden, inflation is greater than GDP, and that means not only is your money worth less, more importantly, it means we're already in a recession. Okay, but you're not even talking about that. You're not interested in that. And this is what's going on, and this is how they're going to shape it, and that's fine. Because I'm telling you, when Trump has his chance, the only thing I'm concerned about, and I said this to you in our private conversations, I honestly believe they're going to cut his mic early. I honestly believe that they are going to interrupt him while he's giving his point of view, and when he's giving his rebuttals, they're going to do whatever they can to try and get him off his game. It's not going to work, but that's not the point. The point is they're going to interrupt him so that people can't hear what the man has to say in a concerted manner. Right. And so that's what's going to happen with the debate. Yeah. The key thing here is just to make Uncle Joe look like he is lucid. Yeah, that's it. Make
him look better in any part of the argument, either in substance or in stature. Absolutely, they're going to try to prop him up. There is a wrinkle here, and I want to throw this at you. What if they throw him under the bus? What if the objective is, instead of giving him a shot of Adderall, they give him a shot of barbiturates, and then he has a piss-poor performance and they 25th Amendment him, as I said before, and then use that as a pretext for 25th Amendment. Kamala Harris is first woman president for 6 months, and then on the new ticket you have Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or, God forbid, Hillary Clinton.
Well, they don't need to give him barbiturates. They just need to let him go out there with a shot of vitamin C and think he's got amphetamines in him.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is, I honestly believe no matter what they do for him, he's not going to do well. And even if, again, he doesn't have to win in order to win this debate.
Right.
He just has to appear lucid.
Right.
He has to appear like he can finish a thought. As long as he can finish a sentence without talking about corn pop, that's all that matters.
Yeah, he's only going to be good for half an hour.
Half hour at best.
Yeah.
And so the wheels are already in motion. He is not, and I said this 2 weeks ago. I said this months ago, and I said you're going to have to start flagging tape or finding some way to mark up your digital memory with all your shows when I make a prediction. Because I told you last year, I told you back in March, I told you 2 weeks ago, I'm telling you now, and I'm going to keep telling you until Gavin Newsom or Michael Obama or the two of them are named as the nominees 2 months from now at the Democrat convention, which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, this is the latest the Democrats have ever held a national convention in the month of August.
Yeah.
Ever.
And that's why they pushed for the debate early.
That's exactly right. That's the purpose of these two early debates. There's only going to be one because both you and I are convinced there is nothing Uncle Joe can do to save his candidacy.
All right,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say before we close out, I just want your opinion on Trump beats Biden for king of debt. How is that possible? I know Trump is not a conservative, fiscal conservative, for those who don't know what conservatism means, a fiscal conservative. But Trump in no way was the king of debt compared to Biden. Biden in his first term spent $6 trillion with the COVID aid. Any comments on that?
Well, let's first talk about the billions that both men have spent on AIDS. Trump was forced to do this because he was told we have to shut down the entire country.
Right.
And the average American cannot afford to go without a paycheck and still keep his bills paid and his rent paid and everything else. So they got out the checkbook and wrote a check for $6 trillion. That is the reason why, that is the only reason why Trump is responsible for, I want to say, an additional, if I'm not mistaken, and you can please correct me, Rudy, if I'm wrong on the number, and I probably am. I want to say he added another $3.5 to $4 trillion of debt to the country. But think about that for a second. Look at all the trillions he had to spend between the months of February and May or June of 2020.
Yeah.
That was to keep the country running.
Yeah.
That was to make sure nobody got through. And that was with the federal government saying to landlords, you can't throw people out of their apartment just because they can't pay their rent. We're in COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. And landlords didn't get any relief from the federal government when it came to paying their mortgages on their properties. Okay. A lot of small investment landlords lost their properties during COVID. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, because of Biden, sure. Biden said you don't have to pay your rent.
Right. You don't have to pay your student loans.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is against the law, and we can go on and on and on. So getting back to the point, Trump will embrace that question and say, take out the fact that I was forced to shut down the entire economy for the better part of 2 months. And my contribution to the national debt is 1/4 of what it is today.
Yeah.
Whereas Uncle Joe here next to me inherited an economy that was already bouncing back.
Yep.
And yet he insisted on the American taxpayer writing a check for an additional $6 trillion.
Yeah.
In addition to the trillions that are going for wars in Ukraine and Israel that could have been avoided if I were still president.
Yeah.
And you begin to see how quickly Uncle Joe is the all-time winner at building debt in a one-term presidency.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the way he needs to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Market Watch tends to lump in the fact that he cut taxes, so they put that as an expenditure, and that's not really an expenditure.
Well, I want to address that really quickly.
You got 30 seconds.
Okay. Here's the deal, folks. When you want less of something, you raise taxes on that product. When you want to increase sales on a certain product, you lower taxes. They're called incentives for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay? If you look at what people are paying for a pack of cigarettes today in New York City, it's over $12 a pack. But if you could buy that same pack of Winston's or Marlboros in Virginia for less than $4. So the whole purpose of raising taxes is to control the economy. So the more you raise taxes, the less tax revenue you get. The more you cut taxes, and of course there's always at a point where you get a negative return on that.
Yeah.
But when Reagan lowered the top tax rate from 90% when Kennedy lowered the top 90% tax down to 70%, there was a huge boom in our economy in the early 60s. Then Reagan came in 1981 after being elected in 1980 and lowered the top index rate from 70 to 28%. Yeah. And the economy took off like wildfire. It was white hot.
Yeah.
And then again, after Clinton had raised taxes, okay, Bush 43 came in and cut taxes again. And what happened after a very soft landing from a very minor, the dot-com bust of 2000, what happened? Those tax cuts took place, and the economy took off, and tax revenues went through the roof. Again, the same thing with Trump. So don't tell me tax cuts don't work. And the other thing to take into consideration is people need to know exactly where Uncle Joe Biden plans to raise taxes. He plans to increase taxes not only on the individual, but on corporations. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen? All of those billions of dollars that were repatriated by companies like Walt Disney and Apple and General Motors, all those companies that brought tax dollars back to the United States that would have otherwise stayed in Europe or in Asia because of the lowering of the tax rate on corporations by Trump. Nobody remembers how many people, whether they were on an assembly line or they were wearing a tie in all these big companies, got huge Christmas bonuses the first year of the Trump administration. You know why? Because they didn't want to pay taxes, and they had all this cash. They were rich in cash, so they gave it to their employees.
Yep.
Nobody wants to talk about that either. Yep. So you want to make the economy take off, lower taxes. Yep. You want to put the skids on, raise taxes.
Yep. I hear you, man. I hear you. We're almost at an hour, so I got to cut it, man. But I appreciate you joining me tonight. Episode 80 of Tuesdays with Perry. Thanks for joining me, my friend. I will see you next week.
I can't wait. I'm ripped and ready to go, Rudy. So it's going to be a long week for me.
All right, man. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next week.
All right. Take care. Enjoy the debate.
All right. See you. All right, there goes Perry, episode 80 of Tuesdays with Perry. We finally got together on a Tuesday. We're going to try to do it again next Tuesday. We will talk about the debate. I will have my regular show on Thursday or on Friday, so join me then for a review of the debate. And join me tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. live on Rumble, Rudy's Revelation. I will see everyone tomorrow. Thanks very much for joining me. Peace out.